Vince, are you ready for rapid fire?
Boom, baby. First rapid fire prior to 6 o'clock. Let's do this thing.
No kidding. Still not even 6 o'clock.
I know.
Fill in the blank. It's blank that according to Pro Football Focus, Howard Cross is the highest rated returning interior lineman in the nation this season.
Slightly surprising because of his size, but he is amazingly good at being efficient inside. So it's not surprising that his stats and his efficiency rating, or however you want to, go after it, which is what Pro Football Focus does.
Yeah.
Which is why he's the highest rated interior lineman. So that makes sense, right? But he's still undersized, so it's a little bit surprising at the same time, right? And so he absolutely deserves it. He's super efficient. He's going to be super efficient this year, I would hope. The more, like you said earlier, the more efficient he is, the better off the guys on the outside are going to be too. So, because they're going to be focusing more attention on the interior, get a lot of one-on-ones on the outside. So, it's great news for Notre Dame is what that is.
Obviously, you'd probably like him to be beefed up at least another 15 pounds or something like that, because he is a little slim still for a nose guard. But, it's going to be very important for Notre Dame. Like, think about what the situation might look like if you didn't have Howard Cross coming back for his fifth year. It would look a lot different. All those conversations that we're having about defensive line recruiting and all that kind of stuff would even sound a lot more vicious than what they're sounding right now. It's interesting. Like, I never completely understand exactly how Pro Football Focus comes up with some of its stuff. I'm not doubting it. And I'm not like, when you look at the season that Howard Cross had, 66 tackles last year, which is an enormous number for a nose guard to begin with, but they credit him with 29 total pressures. And like, you look at the fact that he had 7 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and I think it was like 4 or 5 quarterback hurries. Like, where do the rest of the pressures come from that they're crediting with? Like, that's what I don't know exactly what that looks like, but look, as I was talking about with my own eyes before, we saw what he could do last year. And he's going to be a very important part of Notre Dame's defensive line this season. Again, like, they would be in a lot different situation if they didn't have both Howard Cross and Riley Mills coming back this year. But they've got both of them, and so that's really good news. Will the Notre Dame defense have twice as many interceptions as Riley Leonard throws himself this season?
All right, so here are the stats. It did make sense. So Riley Leonard, in his full season of starting, had 6 interceptions.
Yes,
right?
Correct.
Last year, Notre Dame's defense had 16 interceptions. So if you're just going off of those numbers, you would say yes.
7 by Xavier Watts himself.
Yes, you would say that they will. I will say that I think Riley Leonard does a good job of protecting the football. I don't think he tries to squeeze the ball into too many tight plays. He's not a Brett Favre-ian type quarterback where he's going to take these kinds of chances and things of that nature. And so I don't think his interception numbers will be super high. He's not going to throw them in bunches like Sam Hartman did last year. Because remember, he went on quite the streak without throwing one. And then all of a sudden it was like, ba-bing, ba-bing, ba-bing.
Well,
ba-bing.
and like,
it
kind of surprised me that Sam Hartman only had 8 interceptions himself last season. Like, when I went back and kind of looking at his, because it seems like he had more than that. Yeah.
Because it felt like they all came in on a 3-game stretch.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so that was tough. But no, I think this defense, you just talked about the secondary, right? And you think they're going to be better than they were last year. Well, that's saying something right there. And I think, as down as I'm sure I sounded about the linebackers, I do think they're going to get their hands on the football more often than the last linebacking core. And so that interception number could go up at the end of the day, because I also think the teams are going to be throwing the football a bunch more because they're going to be losing to Notre Dame. So I think it's going to be double for sure, more than double than what Riley Leonard throws. So yes.
Yes, and that's I was going to say. Stymie has the answer.
There we go.
When you look at the schedule Notre Dame is going to play, and like the fact that you've got two service academies instead of just Navy. You've got Army and Navy, and you've got two MAC teams. It's just the schedule they're going to play should make it very conducive for Riley Leonard, to not be in situations where he's going to throw a bunch of careless interceptions. The quality of defenses he's going to play are going to be minimal. And then, as you said, the other teams are going to be thrown going to be that good. So, like, even if Riley Leonard throws 8 or 9 interceptions, I could easily see Notre Dame's defense in the vicinity of 16 to 18 to even 20 interceptions that they have themselves this season.
Yeah, they're going to get their hands on a lot of footballs, that's for sure. And they're going to make some people pay for testing them.
I agree with that. So Markus Burton made a decision to come back. I want to talk about Markus Burton a little bit here, Vince. After entering his name in the NBA's early entry list, Burton has announced that he's going to return for his sophomore season at Notre Dame. So is Burton's return more important than any of the 3 transfers the Irish added this offseason, for starters?
100%, absolutely, hands down, no question, more important. And it's not just because I'm wearing the Penn shirt where Markus Burton went to school and I got to watch him every, his whole senior year doing what he does. We all got to watch him do what he does against, ACC opponents and as a true freshman, which even though I watched him all senior year and watched him do the things that he did, I didn't think he was going to, I didn't think his game was going to translate as quickly as it did to the collegiate level. I didn't.
I was very surprised with that as well.
Yeah.
Just the fact, I thought that he would be good.
Yeah.
But to lead the team in scoring 17.5 points a game and end up being the ACC Rookie of the Year away, like that kind of season, I didn't see coming. Yeah,
me neither. And like I said, he took over games in high school, but there's plenty of guys around the country that could take over games in high school, right?
Right.
He took over games in college at his stature. He was able to do that. I mean, his first step, his shooting ability, all of those things, I think I was shocked translated as well as it did. Now, okay, let's deal in reality. They did do that. They did translate. He was that team offensively last year, Sean. And I don't think anybody can argue that, really. When Markus Burton was on, the rest of the team kind of followed suit. He was the leader of that team. Right. Now, it was a young team, and they all kind of got behind the 5'11" kid who was just slashing and doing the things that he does. They still, even with the transfers, they don't have a dynamic scorer, right? Markus Burton is a dynamic scorer. They need Markus Burton for offense. They do, because he can pull the team with him out of kind of a scoring drought and get the crowd going and doing all of the things that he does. If they lost that because he went to the draft, this team would be starting over from scratch.
No, absolutely. And I mean, when you throw in the fact that he's a point guard, which obviously makes it his job to involve the rest of the guys, plus it's interesting that the men and women kind of both ended up with, sort of more scoring point guards, I think, than maybe, they're accustomed to having. But when you look at the fact that he averaged 17.5, Braden Shrewsbury was the only other guy last year to average in double figures at a little over 10 points a game. Nobody else scored in double figures last year. So if you it stands to reason, I think. You take Markus Burton off of this team, no matter what you added, you didn't have that kind of dynamic point guard who can both score and dish and do all the things that Markus Burton does. So I think that they would have been in really dire straits. They got what they got with these transfers. They got some nice pieces, but there's still enough questions with all of these guys. Like the guy from Lehigh started his career as a Division III player and then was a walk-on at Lehigh and only is a 1-year starter at Lehigh. Again, smaller level and all that stuff. Now, Matt Aloco, he's at least averaged double figures the last couple of years at Princeton. and he can shoot, and that's obviously what they really needed. So I think that he can give them some, not like that's what Markus Burton really needed. Like the fact that you do have Shrewsbury, and then you're going to add this Aloko guy, another guy who can test the perimeter. I think that's going to be really good. But again, if Aloko was your biggest transfer addition and you lost Markus Burton, I think that you're still kind of in a bit of a hurt if you lose Markus Burton.
Oh, big time. Absolutely big time. Because like you said, there's guys that are going to be able to take some of the scoring weight off of him. And it's funny because, a lot of the people that I work with still talk to Markus and, all the different things. And they talk to his people or what, however you want to describe it. But, he would get frustrated at times last year when he would slash down the lane, dish it to a teammate, and they would miss. And sometimes it was more consistently missing than making, right? And so he would get frustrated with that, and then he would end up taking the ball himself. Markus, if I learned anything from watching him as long as I have, he is a very unselfish player. He wants to get his teammates involved, but he also has to trust that those teammates are going to knock down shots, right? And bringing in some of these guys like you just described is a great way to hopefully get some confidence in his teammates that they're going to be able to knock down those shots. And of course, that's going to make Notre Dame better as a whole anyway, because, there were teams that were able to kind of, not lock him up because he still averaged what he did, right? But they were able to slow him down a little bit. If he's able to distribute the ball a little bit more and trust that those guys are going to knock down shots, this team's going to get that much better.
Yeah. And I think that, in terms of not even the transfers of the incoming guys, you had a guy like Sir Muhammad, son of Nazi Muhammad, the former Kentucky player. Like he's the one who intrigues me the most of these incoming guys.
Sure.
Like Cole Serta's got a top 100 ranking and all that kind of stuff. But I think that Muhammad, the kind of athlete that he is, add him to the mix. Again, like I can understand why Markus Burton would be upset with some of the stuff that you talked about last year. But as Shrewsbury continues to go out and bring in some of these, players with his recruiting, I think that it's like it sets up where that shouldn't be near the issue.
Agreed.
This coming up here that it was last year, because all these guys who were together played together, and you've got you've got some better players coming in this year, as well. So, do you think that he'll be at Notre Dame for more than just this season?
I would have never thought that he was going to put his name. Like, I never thought he was leaving after this year, even when he put his name in the draft and all that. Like, I was never really worried about it. It was funny watching people kind of freak out about that locally. And I was like, guys, everybody just take a breath. It's going to be okay. But, he did. And there was obviously enough interest that he put his name out there, right? If he repeats the year that he had this past year, next year, there's a decent chance that he does go. The problem that he's going to have that's never going to go away is his stature. Right. He's never going to be 6'5",
unless he hits a growth spurt this year,
which somehow. I would be shocked if that happened. Right? I mean, it could. And that's
but I mean, if that's what you're hoping for, it's like,
shoot.
There's only so much you can do. So
I mean, if he hits a 5-inch growth spurt, he might be a lottery pick. I mean, just because of his speed and the way he finishes at the rim, all of those things. So I hope he sticks around. I think it would benefit him. I don't know how his game translates to the NBA. I'm not a big NBA guy. I know that apparently it translated really well to the college game. Let's see if he can replicate that. Let's see, now that the book is out on Markus Burton, can he continue to do what he's doing? I fear, I guess, in the good and the bad, right? I fear that he's going to be able to do exactly what he did this last year, and then he'll leave. I hope that's not the case. I hope it's not.
I would be really curious. Like, the fact that he doesn't hit 6 foot is always going to be the biggest thing. And if you are not, if you're not at least 6 foot or even, 6'1", like even if you're 6 foot, that's still on the smaller side, at least you're 6 foot, I guess. But he doesn't jump out of the gym, and he like, if I'm him, some of like that, like the dynamic type, trying to, I guess, jump a little bit higher. I don't know how much you can improve in that in one season, but at the same time, I would spend the summer taking 1,000,000 3-pointers. Like that's I think where he can add to his game. Michael said we have average 6 foot and 6'1" players crushing it in the NBA, but they also are a different kind of athlete than Markus Burton. That's my point. If you are only 6 foot or 6'1" or below, you have to be above average in at least a couple of different things. The athleticism, the ability to jump out of the gym, that is one of them. I mean, look at a guy like Blake Wesley. Like Blake Wesley had a different kind of athleticism, and that's why he got drafted, and that's why he's in the NBA right now. If Markus Burton can improve the 3-point shooting, and I'm talking about dramatically, then that could help him out quite a bit. But he's got to get above average in something else other than just being a nice distributor of the ball, because those guys are a dime a dozen. Basically.
Yeah. I would love to get the report that he got back about, where he's at in his game. You know what I mean? From the NBA side of things. I would love to see what they thought about him and where he's at. I would love to see what that looks like, to be honest with you. But, again, I think his game is suited very, very well for the college game. Could he be productive in the NBA? Sure. He's gonna blow by guys who don't play good defense, who are flat-footed. He's gonna do, all of those things. But the trees get bigger in the NBA than even they are in college, and that's going to be tough for him to finish around the rim, right? I mean, he can jump, like, he doesn't jump super high, but he has the ability to kind of hang in the air better than a lot of people that I've seen, right? And so that will benefit him, obviously. But I don't know. He surprised me once. He could definitely surprise me again, but I think he would be better off sticking around Notre Dame long enough to get his degree and then take his shot at the NBA.
I think so too.
Just in case.
It's going to be really interesting to see, like, is he in a rush to get out the door? Because I think that obviously if he had you can't blame guys for wanting to go and get paid when you have the opportunity. But, just like you said, I think that he outperformed what we all thought that he was going to do this year, just like Blake Wesley outperformed what we thought he was going to do in his 1 year at Notre Dame. So, I mean, that's a good thing, but there's a lot more for him to work on.
Oh, yeah.
And the fact that he didn't get invited to the combine says there's even more for him to work on, because that would have,
And look,
go ahead.
Here's the good news, right, for Notre Dame fans. I know for a fact he turned down some big-time NIL money to go to a certain Big 12 school. Turned down some big-time money. Now, Notre Dame took care of him as well. I mean, he's got some endorsements and he's got some different things going on, and, he's doing fine, but he wants to be at Notre Dame, okay? He wants to be at Notre Dame. He's, everybody's like, oh, he's going to go chase the bag and he's going to go do all these things. He turned down big money. I know this for a fact. So that's good news. He wants to be here. Let's just hope he wants to be here long enough, to get his degree and to do all the things. And gosh, we would love to watch him for 4 years, right? We would love to watch him for 4 years in a Notre Dame uniform and take him back to the tournament and do all of those things. I would personally love to see that. You know what I mean? So I would love to see that. We'll see.
So, Vince, Irish women's basketball head coach Niele Ivey was a guest on SiriusXM Radio recently. After the season ended, there were some rumors floating around that Hannah Hidalgo might possibly transfer, and Ivey was asked on SiriusXM about keeping the All-American point guard at Notre Dame, and here's what she had to say.
Roster retention is real, so I think that was a big part of, right after the season. You never know. You never know the conversations, and for me, I just rely on my relationship. My relationship with the players, it's solid. They know my intent, they know my heart, and so I kind of relied on that. And I was more if she wanted a conversation with me, I had individual player development meetings, kind of talk about where I saw them, what areas that I needed them to work on, those type of things. Just having that communication and transparency is what I try to have with them and with her. She's a very humble star. She's very humble. And again, we have an incredible relationship. And I just I just relied on my relationship with her, and I feel like what she's looking for, it still aligns with what Notre Dame has, and she's a Notre Dame kid, and I'm just grateful that I get a chance to coach her. But it's part of it, to be honest. Like it's definitely something that I feel, especially like you mentioned with a high caliber player like that, I know it's part of it, and so it's just you got to get over those couple weeks, and then when you really realize what your roster is going to look like, and that you have a team that is committed and loyal, and that's what she is, and I'm really grateful for that. But it goes back to our relationship, and I'm grateful for her.
So again, that's Niele Ivey. She was talking on SiriusXM Radio. What do you think about that, Vince? Reading between the lines there a little bit, what do you think about what you heard?
Well, number one, I would love to think that she's being honest about the fact that the relationship that she has with her players is what seals the deal to keep them around and do the different things. And I also think that the Notre Dame women's basketball package, right? Everything, all of it, right? NIL deals, the fact that it's a deep, talented roster, the fact that you've got Niele Ivey, who is a great coach and a great person and a motivator and really obviously identifies with her kids and can say, look, I've been to the mountaintop. This is how you get there. I think Notre Dame has the full package, and I think it's an easy sell, right? And I love the fact that she was honest about it. She's like, look, I have a really good relationship with the players, and I'm able to tell them and be honest with them about what's going on, and I'm able to keep them here. And I think that's accurate. I don't know. I didn't get any like deception or reading between the lines or anything out of that quote. I think her relationship with Hannah is so obvious to everybody that watches a women's basketball game. Like when the game is over or during a game when she's coaching her up, when she comes over, like when there's a free throw happening or whatever, like you can tell that there's back and forth there, that there's a relationship there. I think it's genuine.
I thought it was interesting when, she started off talking about roster retention is real, and she's talking about getting past those first couple of weeks. And, remember, Hannah Hidalgo never entered her name in the transfer portal. So, again, Niele Ivey kept it, a little bit like a politician, the way she answered things. But to me, it seemed pretty clear that there had to be some schools reaching out to Hannah Hidalgo, coming after her, with some NIL opportunities. No, absolutely. But again, it's not a player whose name was in the transfer portal. And you go back to those comments that Nick Saban was making on NFL draft night about the cornerback
trying to get the
Toledo.
Yeah.
We wanted to get him in the transfer portal, and he would never get in. It just feels like there were some schools making those kind of overtures without Niele Ivey coming out and say it, because why does she have to have those relationships, to be able to keep a player, because someone is coming. That's what it seemed like to me.
That's fair.
Listen to that.
No, that's fair. That's absolutely fair. But that's college athletics, man, in this day and age, and look, Notre Dame women's basketball, they're the Alabama of women's basketball, but maybe that's a bit of a stretch. They're the Clemson of women's basketball.
They're one of the elite
analogy.
They're one of the elite programs. Yeah.
Like I said, they have a lot to sell. It's not like they're a mid-major who's just trying to hold on to their good players. Good players are going to Notre Dame, right? And Hannah Hidalgo is one of the best players, if not the best player, on a very talented roster with a very talented up-and-coming coach, and they have every possibility of, getting to the mountaintop next year. And so I think that there's a lot to sell if you're Notre Dame and if you're Niele Ivey. And you add on top of that the relationships that she has, I think retention is really good at Notre Dame.
It goes a long way because, because there was speculation not just about Hidalgo. There was speculation about Olivia Miles with her coming back, with the whole how are they going to play together, and all, which, again, we addressed in the interview that I had with Olivia last week, like there's a lot that comes into play, and NIL is a real thing. And just like she said, as a result, roster retention is a real thing, because you don't just have teams coming after these players, you have teams coming after these players with offers of money. And I think that if the head coach doesn't have that kind of relationship with the players, you're in a lot more trouble. But because she does, I mean, we've talked about it before, just like with Marcus Freeman and his players, the fact that she has those kind of relationships with her players, it's a big part of why they're here to begin with. And it's a big part of why you can weather some of that kind of stuff, because you can have some of those honest conversations and ultimately get them here together. So that's good.
Yep.
So this is a question that came up late in the Champions Lounge board for last week's We In, We Out show. It came in after we did the show, but I thought it was interesting one that we could bring up here. So the person who submitted the question says, ESPN gives more respect to Notre Dame than NBC does. ESPN puts Notre Dame in a prime time more than NBC. Would NBC put Notre Dame in prime time against Duke, Louisville, or Texas A&M? Are you in or are you out on that thought, Vince?
Well, I'm out on the thought because it's not just NBC that makes the decision about where Notre Dame plays their home games, at what time they play their home games. Notre Dame has just as much to say about that as NBC does, if not more.
Texas A&M is going to be a primetime game next year when they come to Notre Dame. So, I mean, I'm definitely out on, like, if you want to look at Duke and Louisville, that's where we can have the conversation. But, like, A&M is going to be a primetime game next year. I would say that with 90% certainty.
Correct, especially depending on how this game goes this year. If it's a close game, then, you know, the rematch will be, everybody will be bonkers for it, right? I mean, Duke, do we think that that's going to be a marquee game? No, I don't. I think it's going to be an afternoon game if it's at Notre Dame. I haven't looked at the 25 schedule. I'm assuming Duke, Louisville, and A&M are all home games.
Well, and look, ESPN makes its decisions week to week.
That's also true.
Like, they have that luxury, whereas Notre Dame, like you said, Notre Dame and NBC talking with each other, they have to decide before the season even starts which are the primetime games and what's the kickoff time for the rest of these games. They don't float them week to week like ESPN and ABC and these other networks do.
Notre Dame doesn't want all night games at home. They don't want that.
Right.
And now that NBC has, Fox has the Big Ten, they're not going to want that either, to be perfectly honest. Now, look, Notre Dame is going to bring in the most eyeballs. I think we can all agree on that. But NBC likes having Notre Dame in the afternoon, that afternoon time slot. They like to dominate that afternoon time slot, okay? Right. And Notre Dame likes to have day games. And the media that covers Notre Dame likes to have day games, okay? So
not that our preferences are
they don't matter at all,
consideration.
But I'm going to throw it out there anyway.
But we do like the day games. Yes.
I hate night games, okay? I hate night games. But no,
especially when you're doing a post-game show and you get done at 3 a.m., right?
Correct. Look, Notre Dame has just as much say on when these games are on NBC as NBC does. You can knock NBC for a lot of things, but game times aren't one of them, in my opinion. They're just not.
No, like, game times have nothing to do with respect. Like, ESPN is going to do what's best for ESPN. Well, obviously, when Notre Dame goes on the road, ESPN, ABC, Disney, whatever, CBS, throw them into the mix. Like, they're going to have that.
Always a night game.
Yeah, like they love having them there. But like the Duke game specifically, because Duke was in primetime last year. Duke was 5-0, and they had Riley Leonard, who was again, we've talked about Riley Leonard before. He was at the time projected to be a first-round NFL draft pick, and they had beaten Clemson. That was a no-brainer for ESPN to put Notre Dame Duke at Duke, two unbeaten teams in primetime. That's why that was there. I mean, look at Clemson. Clemson is a much bigger name, but when Notre Dame went there, they were an afternoon game. Why? Because Clemson had 4 losses going into that game. That's what ESPN is going to weigh every week when they have the opportunity for Notre Dame. How good is this matchup going to be? Just like they do with any matchup that they're going to put in primetime. But if they have midway through the season, if they have a chance to put an undefeated Notre Dame against, or a one-loss Notre Dame against an undefeated whoever it happens to be, North Carolina, Duke, they're going to put that in primetime as much as possible. That's just, and like in terms of NBC, with the respect, like NBC is showing Notre Dame the respect by paying them $50 million a year for the TV rights.
Good call.
Right? Like that's
good call.
That's what that comes down to. The other networks aren't paying Notre Dame that. So
no, no.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Exactly. And just
They
like
get
you. I mean, do you want
respect
every game in prime time? No. And they're not going to be there anyway because NBC also has the Big Ten now, and they're airing those Big Ten primetime games. So
correct.
There are a lot more things to weigh, just like ESPN has to weigh other things, but the decisions are just made completely differently between the two networks with the arrangement and all that.
It's not about respect. It's about who's going to be watching, how many eyeballs are going to be there, and what that looks like, and all of those different things. Yeah.
Exactly. So Joe Buck said he was never going to broadcast baseball again after he left Fox for ESPN a couple of years ago. But later this week, he's going to do a game with Chip Caray for a special broadcast of the Cubs and Cardinals game on Bally Sports Midwest. Buck, you may remember, is the son of Jack Buck, who was once the Cardinals announcer, and Chip Caray is the grandson of Harry Caray, both of those guys in the Hall of Fame. So those two guys were partners doing baseball games back in the 1960s, doing Cardinals games. So what do you think of this? Joe Buck, Chip Caray calling a game together, getting Joe to come out of his pseudo baseball retirement.
You know what? I got to put aside my hatred for the Cardinals, right? And I think this is kind of cool, to be honest with you. I am a Joe Buck fan. And frankly, when Chip Caray used to do the Cubs, I was a Chip Caray fan. I mean, he never bothered me. I thought he was always pretty decent, doing Cubs games. And so I think it's kind of a cool little, nod to the later generation. And honestly, I kind of stinks that it's on Bally Sports Midwest because I won't be able to watch it. I would actually watch those guys do a game because of what it is. I would watch that game and listen to those guys do it. So I think it's kind of cool.
I was just thinking that, because I've got the MLB package on my TV, it would be cool. I could potentially watch that, but I can't because it's the Cubs and Cardinals.
So it's going to be blacked out.
And so I only get, the Cubs broadcast. And this is Bally Sports Midwest is going to be the Cardinals broadcast.
Sure.
But I think it's cool too. And I always felt like, as much as Joe Buck said, I'm not doing baseball anymore. I'm not going to be doing baseball anymore. I always felt like there was something, and this wasn't the thing that I was thinking of, but I felt like he would find some reason to come back within a much shorter amount of time than he was ever letting anyone onto. And I think this is kind of cool. Again, Joe Buck and Harry Caray are both Hall of Fame broadcasters, and you've got the grandson of one and the son of the other, and both of them are obviously in their chosen profession because of the ancestry, the lineage that they have. So I think
sure Chip's kid is a broadcaster as well.
He is.
I'm almost okay. I was almost positive about that. Yeah,
he just began, I think, if I remember right, maybe he's been around for a little, but in terms of I think he might be doing it with them as well. And of course, his dad, Skip, was the Atlanta Braves guy for a long time as well.
Four generations of Carays.
You got 1 million generations of Carays. Yeah. That's pretty cool that they get to do that. Do you remember when Chip was doing the Cubs?
Oh yeah.
Before, because that's actually where he got his start. I guess.
Yeah. I thought he did a good job. I honestly did. Yeah. I thought he did a good job when he was doing Cubs broadcasts. I really did. So it stunk when because I think he left. Didn't he leave to go to the Braves? And then is he now with the Cardinals?
Yes.
Officially? Okay.
Yeah.
So I didn't even realize he was with the Cardinals, if I'm being honest with you.
I think he just moved there within the last couple of years.
Okay.
If I remember right.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I was kind of upset actually when he left to leave the Cubs. I thought he was good. That was a while back.
Yeah, and I mean, if I'm being honest, I'm trying to remember like who they've had since then. I don't feel like the TV announcers for the Cubs have been as good as Chip Caray since he left.
Actually, fair. I think
it's probably been 20 plus years now at this point.
I'm looking to see if I can't figure it out, but yeah, continue, sir.
Yeah. Well, like, do you remember?
Oh my gosh, it was 2004.
Was it? Is that when it was?
Man. He was 98 to 2004. So that was when I was in college, part of which I was in Chicago. And so I listened to a lot of Chip Caray when he was doing Cubs games. And then he was with the Braves from 05 to 09. And 05 to 2022.
I was going to say, I thought it was longer than that. Yeah.
So yeah, they've got it broken up by like different groups would take over the broadcast,
gotcha.
That kind of a thing. But
gotcha.
Yeah, so 23 to the present, he's been with St. Louis.
Yeah. So when you remember, he was supposed to do games with Harry Caray that first season. He was with Chicago, but that's when Harry, I think he fell or something, and they were never. I don't think they were ever actually able to do games together, and then Harry, ultimately passed away at some point after that. So,
sure.
Yeah. So this is kind of cool to get to see something like this. Like you said, you're talking about like the families of these guys are like go back generations all the way to the 1960s, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's definitely cool.
So the movie The Natural just turned 40 years old. How does The Natural hold up for you, Vince?
So this one's tough for me because I could never really get into The Natural. I remember trying to watch it a couple different times and falling asleep. It's very like
it's very slow.
Very slow.
Like it's from a different era. The pace is so slow.
Man, I struggled.
It feels even older than 40, I think.
Yes, it does. I agree with that completely. I didn't realize it was only 40 years old, to be honest with you. But I remember like the bits and pieces of it that I remember, but wasn't there like some abuse in there, and there was like shootings, and there was a lot to it. It was not baseball.
And I guess there was a little bit of abuse now that you mentioned it. The Kim Basinger character.
Okay. So I don't know that it would hold up that well, to be honest with you. It would have to be more fast paced. They would have to,
especially compared to the way movies are cut and edited and stuff like that today. It's a lot like we're going to talk about Top Gun at some point, but like
someday
to think that like now granted, The Natural is a little bit of a period piece as well because of when it's supposed to be set and all that kind of stuff. Like back Babe Ruth, and it's supposed to be set in the 1930s and 40s, or when like in that era. But like when you think that Top Gun and The Natural only came out a couple of years apart, and you think about
oh my gosh,
different style and pacing and stuff like that. But like The Natural really feels like it's from a different era when you sit back. It's just the movie itself, the way the movie is made. Now, when the baseball stuff gets there, the baseball stuff is pretty cool, but there's so much of the off the field story.
Yes.
That definitely, like, I did go back and watch it, I think a few years back, and it's just the pace is a little bit different.
That's
hard. For sure.
It's hard to keep my attention.
And the thing that always bugged me the most about it is, and I don't even know if you remember this. Do you see the very beginning of it when Robert Redford?
I haven't seen it in a long
Redford
time.
is the lead, and Glenn Close, but they're supposed to be teenagers. But the fact that they used both Robert Redford and Glenn Close as the teenagers when Redford is like at least 45 years old, and I don't know how old Glenn Close was, but it just always threw me off that they tried to pass them off as teenagers at the beginning of the movie, rather than just doing like showing a couple like teenage people who looked a little bit like them, and then did some.
You wouldn't think would be that hard to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes, and the ending is great. Like I get the ending and why that's so iconic. I get that,
but to get from the start to the finish,
it is a struggle for me.
You got to be dedicated. You got to. I agree.
It is a struggle to get to that ending, man.
I agree. I absolutely agree. We're going to talk at some point about Top Gun and Top Gun Maverick if we can ever get Jesse
I'm
here.
still listen, people. We're talking behind the scenes here. We talked about the fact that they were going to watch the 2 movies, I think a couple of weekends ago now, and what it was going to be like. I'm still waiting to find out how this went. I know it was a positive experience.
Yes.
That's all I know. I need
positive
more.
reviews from Jesse.
I need more.
He liked both of them, but yeah, we need to dig deeper into this.
Yes, we do. He better show up Friday. That's what I'll say. Better show up on Friday.
I know. He's actually supposed to be coming back to town this weekend.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a charity golf tournament that he's playing in.
He's playing golf. That would be something to see right there.
I've never actually witnessed it, but
I just, I don't see the words golf and Steyrs necessarily in the same sentence because you're not a golfer.
No,
You never claimed to be one.
Nope.
And I just don't see, I don't see Jesse as a golfer.
He goes out golfing with his boss from time to time. They actually went out last Thursday morning. It's like they go out in the morning before work and then do their, I don't know how many holes they play, and then they go to work.
Good for him. Hey, he's in good with the boss. There's nothing
That's
wrong
a long
with that.
day. That's a long day.
That is a very long day. Although unless he's working from home, and then I have no sympathy for him.
Yeah. Well, he does do a lot of that. It's a hybrid. At least a couple days a week, I think. He's home. So, all right. Again, we've got a new time. Don't forget, we are on the live show on the YouTube channel, 5:00 Monday through Friday now, as of today. So 5:00 live shows, podcasts. That means the podcasts get posted a little bit earlier as well. And I think everybody's happy about that. So hit the like button before you leave. Vince, you're out. You can go do dinner earlier now.
Yeah, man. It's exciting.
Yes. Very good. Hit the like button, subscribe, rate, and review, and we will talk to you tomorrow. Oh, by the way, got an interview tomorrow with a Texas A&M guy, Carter Carls. You might remember Carter.
Oh, yeah.
He was for the South Bend Tribune. Covered recruiting.
He's down. Yeah, he's back in Texas, isn't he?
Yep.
Because he was always from Texas. I remember when we used to have him on the radio show. I'd have to dial up Texas.
That's right.
During the pandemic, because he's like, I'm just going home. And so he was
forgot about that.
Hanging out at home in Texas.
Yep.
So, yeah, that's right. I remember that.
Yep. So we'll talk a little Texas A&M on tomorrow's show. Get a preview of the season opener and the season opening opponent with Carter Carls on tomorrow's show. So until then, we will talk to you then on IB Nation Sports Talk.